type is the way it is. So let's pull up, now that my laptop's good to go and I have Twitch open, I can see if anybody's viewing, etc, etc. So let's talk about dark type. Dark type has some interesting characteristics. So first we're going to go to new team and then add Pokemon and look at OU bracket first. So the thing about dark type is that unlike Grok, which we just did previously, dark type actually does have some say in OU. There's definitely some dark Pokemon in here. For instance, Tyranitar, as mentioned earlier, sets up Sandstorm teams, and in general has the base stat total that's absolutely absurd and can crush you if you're not prepared for it. I usually rarely see T-Tars like carry a game, but they definitely can like you can build a team around them. So there's one. Sableye is always a problem. Magic Bounce and high defenses makes this thing a living hell to go against because you can't. Usually for most tanks, you could wind it down. It'll burn you. It'll bounce everything back. It's really hard to get anything going against it. So that's why it's there. Let's see. I know there's a couple more. Greninja is a special powerhouse, so you have to always be aware of him. Especially if you don't know which one is coming in. It could be Protean or Battle Bond, and if he gets Battle Bond, it's pretty much GG. The Pokemon becomes ridiculous if he does. Gyarados Mega is not usually that much of a problem, just tries to overwhelm your stats. I think the normal one can just do just as well. Where is it? And lastly, Bisharp. I'm not 100% sure why Bisharp's in OU. I predict the reason he's in OU is because he deals with the Tapus really well. He's not really that weak against them. He's Dark Steel, which really helps, and he's got really good defenses. So my guess is he's good against the Tapus and can like Iron Head them and Swords Dance and kind of can like sweep teams. Sucker Punch through things as well. Cures a lot of his stuff. That's my guess. I'm surprised he's OU. He's a good Pokemon, but he's not actually one of my favorite Pokemon, but he's not on my Dark team in general. So what is Dark? Let's bring up the Dark type on Bulbapedia. So Dark has, let's just talk in general about it first. So Dark was introduced basically to counter Psychic because it had no weaknesses and was redonkulous in the first generation. And then they introduced Dark. They're like, okay, we need to stop Alakazams and Mewtwo's and all of this shit from, and even Hypno and like Jinx, and like they're just mowing us down. We have nothing to stop them. Executors. How do we stop these guys? Well, let's introduce a new type, and you get Dark from this. So Dark, just like you'd expect for a type that kind of is introduced to counter a specific type, it's not good in every situation. It's very niche. It's very general too. It's basically Psychic, but the opposite end of the spectrum. So it's weak against fighting as opposed to being strong against fighting like Psychic. They make a triangle essentially out of it. Dark has pretty lackluster defenses. I think we'll go down to it right now. It only resists Dark and Ghost, and then it's weak against Bug and fighting. So it's not like prominent in defending at all. Like it doesn't resist much and it doesn't really take much damage. And those two offensive types. Bug is not that great, but you're going to see fighting a lot, so that's not great to get hit by. Psychic, you don't see that much, so even though it's got a resist or like a straight not effective at all, which is normally really good for instance, blocking electric moves like ground or flying blocking ground or fighting getting blocked by ghost as well as normal. Those are all excellent. However, Dark's is not that useful, unfortunately. Dark's Psychic. Psychic is not the most common of offensive types. It's usually only on Psychic Pokemon. No one usually takes Psychic type moves because there's more priority moves to take. It's the same as Dark. So what happens with Dark moves is it doesn't take half. Yeah, I was going to say Steel, they changed it. So that's big, actually, now. But Dark is usually only used on offense for its utility and its trickery, I'll call it. It's not usually used for stab at all. Usually, I mean, you have dark, like, you have good dark moves. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's good dark moves, but you don't usually use it to counter these Pokemon because I don't know. Like Ghost, I guess, because you're probably gonna see dark moves more than psychic moves, so I guess that's good. But for the most part, this offensively dark is not the most prevalent type either. It's kind of just there, dark. It's really strange. Um, it's just it doesn't have much interaction in the game in terms of like its weaknesses, its strengths, etc., etc. So what does dark actually do? Dark, as I mentioned before, it does hit a lot of things just neutral, which is great. Typically, that's pretty good. It's same as psychic. It hits a lot of things neutral, good and bad. Um, but the big thing is about dark is it has some of the best utility moves in the game. I would argue that knockoff is probably a top 10 physical move in the game, especially um, especially since more and more uh, items. It got buffed too, which I think it became 1.560 instead of like it used to be 40, so it used to be like really niche. But knockoff is definitely a move that you want on almost every team comp. Similar to Earthquake, you always want kind of like those moves. Similar to like a fighting move, you always kind of want one of those three moves. A knockoff is exceptionally useful. It can make any tank, anything, just a better Pokemon by having it. It brings utility. You don't have to have damage behind it at all. So knockoff is an extremely useful move. I can't say that much about most other moves that Dark has. I think knockoff stands like way above the rest. I remember Pursuit was a really big thing as well. You can basically one-hit KO, kill things that want to run away. It's pretty useful. For the most part, it's pretty predictable a lot of cases if you switch in against the dark. Usually dark type Pokemon are the only things that carry it. But you can definitely murder some psychics with that. Alakazam's your Muse. I think Muse actually would tank it really well. But like for instance, you have dark moves that just do something extra with it. Let me look up other dark moves. Give me a sec here. I know there's. I'll basically try to pick the ones that I know for sure are meta. So Switcheroo, Sucker Punch is a big one too. It basically lets slow Pokemon, like I was mentioning earlier, with Bisharp or Cacturn, if you Cacturn of all things. But like you get my point. It makes it so you can play around and get priority on move or Pokemon that you have no business getting priority on that are slower than Sea Slugs. So Sucker Punch is another like one of these moves that have like utility behind it, like Pursuit, like Knockoff. Then you have your token Dark Pulse and Crunch, or your basically physical and special type stab that most people will have if they're just trying to do stab damage. Foul Play is actually interesting as well, but for the most part, you're not really looking at any other moves really. Like Dark doesn't have much behind it anyway. Torment, like I see like once in a blue moon. Taunt, I guess counts, but in terms of like actual moves behind it, you usually don't see any other moves but like those like 7. It's not many. So, and most of the time, like I said, they have kind of utility behind them. Like you rarely would see a non-dark Pokemon be like, yeah, you know what I need to like beat this enemy team? I need this fucking Dark Pulse like right now. No. Like Dark doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't really jump at anything like that you really need to counter. Like sure, there's. Let me go back to how many Ghosts are in meta or Psychic. We'll do that. I don't think there's many Ghosts that are also weak to Dark. So for instance, Gengar is another one you could probably just kill. But Gengar you could probably kill with anything else. Let's be real. He has Cursed Body. You're probably gonna be able to use a ground move to like wipe him out or something else. Maybe what's the other one? Not Psychic. It is Psychic, but Gengar usually is not a problem because he's frail anyway. Let's see. I didn't. Latios, like I see more times you're often than not you're probably just gonna use an ice move against him, or Marowak, Alolan, you'll probably just have a water move somewhere in your team comp as well. So there's like already like usually options. Maybe Mimikyu, but like Fairy already resists it, so you're probably using a Steel move, I'd assume, on Mimikyu of all things as well, maybe a Poison move. So all of those moves are more common than Dark. So it's just Dark just doesn't really have like a good set. Like it hits all these things like even, but for the most part, like you're not really going like I need this dark stab to get in there, or this dark Pokemon makes or breaks my team or whatever. It's kind of sad, but like dark type's kind of like that type that is just thrown on Pokemon just as an afterthought. So it's not really it doesn't make or break the Pokemon. For instance, there is one where Muck, who's on my team, gets better with the dark type. He's one notable one. I'm trying to think if there's anything that is like dark that you're like, oh wow, like is better. Like you could argue like Krabby and what's it called? Let me look it up. Crawdon. So Crawdon and Kingler, for example, like is there a difference between the two of them? One's just a crab with dark and one's not. Uh, it doesn't really matter. You just add another stab, but you add so many more weaknesses. You probably just rather not be dark. Fighting's very common. Bug, not so much, but it's just an afterthought type. So it doesn't really affect the game that much. I think it's just like the most average of types. It's like that and Psychic, or you probably just don't want to even be. They're usually more about their moves and how much utility their moves break rather than the stab behind a lot of their moves. So, Dark, as interesting some of the moves can be, Switcheroo, Taunt, Knockoff, Pursuit. Unfortunately, like, you don't really want... They don't really make or break the meta that much. So, it's an okay type. You probably don't want to be it. You probably just want to have knockoff. That's basically what Dark is there for. Knocking off everything that you see. So I like Dark type. I really do. A lot of Dark type Pokemon are really cool. But the problem is they get punched into oblivion by like fighting moves. So I did not know how Ucho was OU. It's pretty nice. Good work, man. But that's Dark type in a nutshell. Pretty. There's not much really to say about it. It's just there. Thankfully, it doesn't get blocked by Steel anymore. So when building